Okay, can everybody hear me all right? I see thumbs up. That's a good thing. Well, welcome, and I appreciate the turnout. You know, I'm not surprised because, you know, we have a community that cares about what we're doing here, and so I appreciate you all being here. I would like to start out by doing something slightly off topic, and I promise you we'll come back to topic very quickly. But you know, this past leadership weekend, we had a pretty serious outage at the ISUB and the Maynard Law Building. Overflow. We got more chairs coming in. Awesome. And it really could have been a true disaster. Not only did we have some of our most prominent alumni coming in for their advisory board meetings across campus, we had over 450 students, high school students on campus that came with their parents. And while, you know, while facilities reacted incredibly quickly, and events and support services worked with the registrar and student affairs to rearrange our classes. And while our university communications department got the word out incredibly quickly, and Sodexo pivoted and got everybody fed, including the advisory board members and the high school students, and pulled off our gala with a very, very nice dinner that evening. And while SEM and Advancement flexed to host our guests, as vandals, we just did all the hard things, and nobody even noticed. I mean, it was just unbelievable. And that's just the way we roll, right? We do the hard things and we make it look easy. And we've got a bunch of other folks who have been displaced. Some of them are actually sitting outside here in some of these rooms, and they just got on with the work, you know? And so I think we've got a lot to be proud of our community. They're terrific people. And, you know, everybody just stepped up and did it. And I didn't hear a single complaint. Everybody was just focused on getting it done. And it got done. And so I just wanted to thank you for that. And for those of you that weren't aware, let you know how big of an effort that's been. We're still not totally up and running. We're hoping to get the classrooms at least up and running by Monday. Hopefully we'll be able to stick with that. It'll be a while longer before we get the ISUB up and running. But anyway, thank you for all of those, particularly those here who had something to do with that. That was key. So now for the main event. Yeah. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. So now for the main event. We're here to talk about budgets. And I know there's just a ton of questions. I'll just start out by saying our goal is, you know, really to I guess I should advance this, shouldn't I? Our goal is to really communicate, right? We want to review our financial challenges and then have a Q&A session, which is really what I hope most of this is about, so that we can answer any questions you can have. I can say that, you know, because we try to get this communication as quickly as possible after we recognized where we thought we would end up, we don't have a lot of answers. You know, we have a lot of answers about process, but the details are yet to come. So I'll just preface by saying that. But we will be as open and transparent as we can be about any questions that you have. So our goals really out of this whole budget process really are to balance our checkbook and to build savings. And we need about $8 million on top of the $14 million we took this year. And as a process, we're going to handle it pretty much the same way we handled the first $14 million. And that is that I'm really looking to our vice presidents and our deans to work with our faculty and our staff to identify the areas that we can make those cuts with having the least impact on our operations. Boy, we did overflow and we still have standing. Thank you all for coming. That's awesome. It's going to be hard. I'm not pretending that it won't be, but we need to face this and work through it as a community. And I know we will. Everybody's been great so far. And longer term, these are tactical. We're dealing with our short-term issues, but longer term, you know, we need a model that'll work for us. So we have our Sustainable Financial Working Group also working on the model itself, because the one we've had really hasn't really worked well for us. And I'm willing to answer any questions about that as well. And finally, I'll just say we want your feedback, and so we'll finish with that, you know, and give you ways of communicating with us, because we do, your opinion does count, and we want to be responsive to any ideas you have. So we've got a few slides I wanted to start out with, which explains the problem. This is our unrestricted net position. This is what we're often talking about when we talk about the reserves that we have as an institution. That the state board requires we have a 5% reserve. As you can see, we are in a negative position at the moment. That has occurred for really two reasons. One, an accounting change in how we account for our healthcare liabilities, and 2 years of fairly significant operating losses. So that's the picture of what we're dealing with. Here's our total revenue expenses over the last couple of years. This will also show you what we're dealing with. That gap, the green line is revenues, the red line's expenses, and that gap between there for the last 2 years has been, give or take, 20 million or a little bit under 20 million for 2 years running. So that's really helped create our deficit from an operations point of view. And where we tend to really be extremely bad at what we do is where we try to predict our revenue from tuition. And that's why I wanted to share this with you. And it's really because we kind of had a policy, from what I understand, and Brian, you can correct me if I'm wrong, or John, but a policy of kind of setting our budgets based on flat enrollment. And that just hasn't been the case for a while. We've either had enrollment decreases, or if we've had enrollment increases, it's been a mix that hasn't generated new revenue. It's actually generated less revenue. So these, in my view, are kind of, in a quick snapshot, explain why we are where we are. And here's what we've done about it. It's not like, we haven't done anything. You as a community, we've come together and we took a one-time cut in 19 that became a permanent cut in 20. Then when I got here, we realized that wasn't even close to answering the problem. So we made more cuts of 14 million, which we're going to roll into next year. And then on top of that, we're adding 8. And we believe that we're confident that, barring any recession or any cuts from the legislature, that if we can do this, we'll be out of the woods. We will be balanced. We'll have our checkbook balanced, and we'll have our reserves starting to recover. So again, the way to think of this, just going back to me, this is our savings account, which we've depleted, and this is our checkbook. So the idea is that we get this back above zero and at least at a 5% surplus eventually. It won't happen next year, it won't happen the year after that, but eventually. And that we get that green line back above the red line. That's our goal. So with that, I want to just open it up. Did I miss something? They're still breeding in chairs, I see, which is a good thing. So, with that, I just want to open this up for discussion. Any questions are worthwhile. They're all welcome. So don't feel like you can't ask anything. Well, I know by tradition, I'd like to go here, but we have to go with Kenton, right? Isn't that the way we start?
Good afternoon, President Green and members of the university community. I'm Kenton Bird from Journalism and Mass Media. First, President Green, thank you for meeting with us today. I appreciated your comments in your memo last week that we not let our challenges define who we are as an institution. Nonetheless, you inherited a heck of a mess. Given that these deficits have been 10 years in the making, have you considered asking our Board of Regents, the State Board of Education, for a 2-year grace period to allow us to replace the reserves by FY 2023 rather than the FY 2021? My fear is that the cuts of the size now contemplated will be so severe that they will interfere with our ability to carry out our vital missions of teaching, research, and outreach. I think that once the working group is up and running, we can be more strategic about our budgetary decisions and less reactionary. And I know that the board would support that, that they don't want us to diminish the mission of the University of Idaho in our haste to quickly restore the cuts. And frankly, I'm scared to death of what this place would look like with the $22 million cuts in the next fiscal year.
Okay, thank you. Good question. So to be clear, we're not trying to replace our reserves in 1 year. Our reserves, it's going to take us several years to replenish our reserves. So that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to build $20 million of reserves plus take $20 million of cuts. What I am trying to do is balance our checkbook to stop the bleeding. You saw our reserves are already negative. We've spent our savings account. So it's not like we have a lot of time, absent some kind of miracle funding from some source that, so far I've been yet to identify, that would buy us a heck of a lot more time. So we have over a $400 million budget. These are $22 million of cuts. I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm saying it's doable, and I believe that we can do this over the next couple of years in a way that will not damage the franchise. That is why I'm pushing a lot of these decisions down to people who are best able to make those assessments. I'm not coming in and saying, we have to cut, these programs and we have to fire these people. I'm not doing that. I'm saying, deans, faculty, you come to me and tell us how we can do this most effectively. And I think it's important that we face up to this and that we do it as quickly as possible so we can focus on the good things. And this university has a lot of strengths we should be building on. We've got a lot of great programs we should be investing in. It's important that we get this behind us and start focusing on those things that are important. Thank you for your question. It's a very good one. I'm going to move over here, Dan.
Okay, thank you so much for having us. This is deja vu during your interview. Kenton started, I came second. I ran to the mic to try to beat him. Dale Graydon, Department of History, year 28. You've asked for input, so I don't have questions, I have comment.
Okay,
quick comment. It pains me deeply to be reading about this idea about outsourcing, that in some ways this is going to create efficiencies and bring some outside people in who knew better about how to run an operation. Allow facilities to make decisions about facilities. They've committed their lives to the institution. Let them figure out how to make cuts. Student recreation center, we employ students. It's a student facility. It pains me that we're even pondering this idea of getting emails that, quick, we're going to come up with a solution of outsourcing and leave these kids, with less income, obviously, leave these people who come and clean my incredibly clean administration under the worst situation. They'll probably make a little bit, maybe make the same. No health care. Some people get cut or they get laid off, like we've already been through, where people get laid off and then they get reemployed by the outsourcers at a lower price. I plead with you not to outsource as a way to resolve this problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your comments, Dale. It's one tool. And I hear you. We did outsource with Sodexo. They still hire students. We would continue, I think, to require if we were to outsource, and I'm not saying we will, but we would require that they continue to do that. It's important for us, I think, that we find jobs for our students. It's critical to our mission. So again, it's one tool. I've asked Brian to take a look at this. We're looking at everything. We may or may not do it. But at the end of the day, we're going to put the institution first and what's most important for the institution to function. But I hear you. I've gotten many very well-written, well-reasoned letters from folks who work in facilities, very balanced letters, and with ideas. And to me, I appreciate those. They all have a voice. And we'll make the best, decision for the institution. But we're going to take what they say into consideration. We definitely are. And I appreciate your feedback. Yes.
Hi, my name is Kristen Halton. I'm faculty in sociology. This is my 7th year, I think, since I started. And so I want to echo what Kenton said about I don't envy you this position, and I understand and recognize how difficult this must be, and I am so glad I'm not the one having to do it. And I also want to thank you for making this as democratic as possible and letting us be involved, so thank you. The second thing I want to preface this with is I really, embracing this metaphor of the Vandal family, I really love being a part of the Vandal family. And it's with that in mind that I have sort of a question and a comment. The question is actually deeply related to what Dale just said. I read in a news article today that in the coming weeks we can expect outsourcing. So the news is making it sound like it's assured, and I hear you saying that's not the case. So my question is actually, and like Dale, I'm a social scientist, and I understand that this can lead to lower salaries and a loss of benefits. So I'm wondering how much work the task force has done to evaluate the impact that outsourcing will have on the members of our family who will be outsourced, and also on the broader Moscow community. And then I have a suggestion of how to do that better if it's not being done. So I have a colleague who studies fiscal crises. She's here today somewhere, Deb Thorne. And when this task force was first announced, we had responded and asked that she be put on it because there were no social scientists and this is what she specializes in. We were told it would be a bad precedent to change the task force once it had been put in place, not by you, but by someone who sent us an email. I don't even remember who that person was. And I was a little startled because as academics, I would think that when we learn new information, we want to do better. And so we would make changes. And so I'm wondering if now would be an okay time to add a social scientist to the task force.
Thank you. Well, we certainly, the task force isn't taking up things like outsourcing. As I mentioned, the task force is looking at the overall financial model of the university and how we're going to fund ourselves going forward. So rather than an incremental approach like we've been doing, like no matter what, if we get 2% more from the legislature, everybody gets 2% more, whether the college has had an increased enrollment or a decrease. We're looking at different funding models, ones that I think better align ourselves with student needs and with the revenues coming in through the door. That's what we've asked them to do. We'll probably continue down that road. It's already underway. But as far as the impact of social impact on outsourcing, I would be open to listening to what your thoughts are on that, and happy to bring that as part of the decision-making process. You correctly pointed out, I mean, no decisions have been made on that yet. No recommendations even come to me yet. So don't know where that's going to be. But again, happy to have input on it. And if you've got views on how that's going to affect the community, I'd like to hear about it.
I'm not tall enough. Okay, there we go. Hi, Scott Green. I'm Michael Overton. I'm untenured, so this is probably not the greatest idea. No, joking aside, I know it's not a thing. I have 2 quick questions, or at least they should be quick. Are you considering declaring a state of financial exigency?
No.
Okay.
And the reason for that is I won't unless I have to, because then we lose control of our future. Okay. Right? I want our community to deal with our financial problems, and I'm confident we can do that as a community. So we will, and it's only in the event that we come to an impasse that the state board would have to come in and they'd make the decisions for us, right? Yeah. Being our boss. So I'm doing everything I can to say no, I don't plan to do that, and I don't think we have to. Okay. That's our goal.
Great. My second question is a follow-up. As we get going in this, it's foolish of us to think that layoffs aren't going to happen. The budget crisis is too severe. Can we get a promise from you right now that you will follow the handbook policy on layoffs, and 2, that everything will be done as humanely as possible, above and beyond what the handbook suggests? Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
So I don't know what the handbook says. I'd have to turn to my lawyer, wherever he is in here. But I'm a big believer in empathy, and we talk about the Vandal family, and we have to do things the right way, right? And with a lot of empathy and making sure we're taking care of our people. So, so I can promise that. I can.
I'm Dean Edwards. I'm Professor Emeritus, and I came here for one reason, to find out what happened. And it looks like from your plot, 2017 is all of a sudden we started losing our reserves. Evidently we had an increase in expense, and I'm not sure what that is or how this happened. What was the expenses? What became so difficult that we had to spend all this money and cut down in our reserves?
Yeah, so I might have to lean, since it's the past, I might have to lean on Brian a little bit, but my understanding is that there were several sources. One, we had CEC increases that the legislature funds.
Now, what's CEC?
CEC.
What
Right.
is it?
Yeah, sorry, employee compensation.
Oh, okay.
I'm only here for 4 months. I've already picked up the acronyms. I don't know why, but yeah, sorry about
I've been here
that.
through-
I asked the
I
same
still
question.
don't
When I
know.
first came, I said, what's CEC? Yeah. And so when we do that, we'll pass on the CEC to our, that employment increase to our employees. We also, about half of our population is what we call our direct employees, right? So we'll also usually give them the 3%, but we don't really have a revenue source for that, and really never have. So if the legislator doesn't fully fund, and that's what we call when we say fully fund, we mean fund both, those who are direct and those who are state, affiliated with the state general education budget, then we have to come up with that revenue somewhere else. So that's part of the gap for the last couple.
So we got an increase in salary and it wasn't covered.
It wasn't covered, right? That's part of it. Another part, healthcare costs, I believe, also went up pretty dramatically, Brian. I think I read somewhere in the Argonaut, they pointed out to me of 7 million of that. And then, of course, the deep increase in our decrease in our reserves was really about a $30 million OPED liability that we're now required to put on our balance sheet. There's also increased costs associated with our OPEB liabilities. So,
OPEB, or,
yeah, which is healthcare, retiree benefits, retiree healthcare benefits
okay.
that will be paid out over time.
So
And that-
healthcare and healthcare retiree benefits.
Yes.
The biggest expense then.
Well, it's one of the, it's an expense, I wouldn't say it's the biggest, because you saw that over 2 years, we lost, nearly 40 million,
million,
right?
yeah.
And that had nothing to do with the change in accounting. That had to do with just actual losses that we had, from these other sources.
So was it increase in expenses or lack of income? It's still
Or lack of
clear.
what?
Revenue.
Well, you saw the
Seems like
tuition.
revenue's been pretty
You
flat.
saw the tuition miss, right? So, it was a combination of both. Brian, can you shine any more
Yeah,
light?
in
I don't know if I
fact,
got that well or not.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Can we go back to the graph that shows revenues and expenses? So I want to just have you pay attention for a second to the slope of the red line from 16 to 17 to 18. There's no change in the slope of that line. That means the rate of spending didn't change between 16 to 17 and 17 to 18. What changed from 17 to 18 was the green line. That's revenue. So there are a couple of big things that hit us in fiscal year 18. Scott, could you jump back one more now to the net position, and I'll just, right there. So that precipitous drop from 17 to 18 was about a $50 million drop. There were two components to that. The $30 million liability that Scott indicated needed to be recorded on our books. It had never been on the books before. $30 million of the
where did that
$50 million drop. Promises we've made over the last decades to retirees who qualify for health insurance after retirement. That's where the only thing that's happened here is the Governmental Accounting Standards Board has said you've been making promises for all these years. You must record the value of those promises on your financial statements now. So that's the change that occurred for 30 of that $50 million. The other $20 million.
So that's just an accounting change.
Correct. That's an accounting change. Yep.
And is that federal or state or legislative?
National Governmental Accounting Standards Board, authoritative for all colleges and universities and other nonprofits nationwide. So we're in no different situation than Michigan State in that regard. The other $20 million, as Scott indicated, we spent more than we brought in. And Scott, if you could just switch to the one other graph here, you can see the gap. Between the red line and the green line for fiscal year 18 is a $20 million gap. So
And that's just tuition.
not just tuition, all revenue sources. Financial statements include all revenue sources. Grants and contracts, capital gifts and grants, tuition and fee revenues, all revenue sources combined were down compared to the prior year.
I don't really see where our student population stayed the same. We may have reduced our tuition a little bit. I understand our grants and contracts are up. It's still a mystery to me exactly why we don't have more revenue. Because I don't see that much change is what I'm saying.
Well, I could certainly point you out to our financial statements that are on the website, and you'll see the drop in revenue. Audited financial statements, external auditors coming in and reviewing those statements, and our revenues were down in fiscal year 18 as compared to 17. Actually, $10 million of that capital gifts and grants coming into the university for construction projects, down compared to the prior year.
Okay, so
Yep.
some gifts and gifts are down 10 million. That's significant.
Capital gifts, grants, tuition and fee revenue, yes, all of the above. Financial statements include all categories of revenue, not one in particular. If you go to the financial statements, you won't find one that's down. You've got to look at all of them, sir.
All right,
Yep.
and that adds up to about 20 million.
Yes.
Thank you. Jody,
A question from a colleague online. He
okay?
says, I understand the need to make cuts based on the equation, but what's being done about the revenue side?
Good question. So we are continuing to invest because what's very important is that we grow out of this as well. The more we can grow out of this, the better chance we have to actually continue to build this great university to align our programs with what students want. So we have been investing in marketing and in enrollment. And I've been out, as most of you know, I've been out raising money for marketing. Usually in the private sector, a company will put aside 1 to 2% of their revenues for marketing business development. For us, we just haven't had that luxury and haven't really ever done that. One of our competitors, they spend $2 million on digital marketing alone to attract students. So we are doing that, and you've probably seen it. You've seen the new ads. You've seen the billboards going up. Well, you may or may not have seen the new billboards going up because most of them are in Spokane Valley or in the Treasure Valley. We've wrapped buses. We continue to work on our digital marketing as well. So we're making a real effort and to get out there and get our story told. So part of that is also me getting around and telling our story. And that's part of my job. And hopefully you think I've been doing that well because, I do think we've got a lot of momentum right now. I think that when you see that last year we had in our first Envision event for high school students here on campus, we had 70 last year. We had 195 in the first event. And in the second event last year, which just occurred over this last weekend, last year we had 300. This year we had over 450. So we're seeing a lot of good response, I think, from a lot of the work we're doing already. And there's more to come. There's more to come. I've gone around, like I said, and hit up our alumni to help, provide the money so that Stephanie's team could actually have a budget that we could actually go out and get our story told. Because frankly, in some of the markets down in southern Idaho, we haven't been in the discussion for way too long, and we're about to let them know who we are again. So we're doing a lot there. So great question. Thank you, Jody, for letting them know. I appreciated that question very much. Back to this side.
Hi, I'm Rob Ely from the math department. I just have a comment I want to make. I was a little bit, I don't envy your job for anyone who's making these
Well, so far
about
nobody
what the
wants
cut.
it.
No one wants it? Yeah. I'm one of the things I was a little worried about was we were talking a bit about the possibility of centralizing more things at the university. I think this could be the wrong way to go. And the reason I think this is that I think a lot of ways to centralize things pull faculty members and instructors out of some of that work that puts us into contact with students. And I'm also worried that about cutting people that actually teach students. I think that the student experience at the university is based on the classes they take, the kinds of classes that they have that are available for them, and the contact that they have with faculty members. So I want to just say on behalf of, I don't want to say on behalf of all the faculty, but on behalf of the faculty that I've been speaking to about this, particularly, if there's some cuts to bureaucratic offices and some of those jobs end up being pushed onto faculty, we would prefer that to having a bunch of faculty cut and having all the courses not being able to be offered anymore for students.
Thank you. Yeah, so let me say this. If I talk to somebody on the staff side, they say, well, you know, you've got a 14-to-1 faculty ratio. You really should just take it all out of faculty. And when I talk to faculty, well, you don't need all those vice presidents. You can get rid of them. And, you know, if you're talking to, you know, right?
Everyone points, right? Right.
So, you know, I would encourage us to focus on our areas as a community, saying, what can we do differently to lower our expenses, rather than pointing the finger at others? Because, you know, really, that is when we start tearing at the social fabric of who we are. You know, the staff side has taken a lot of hits. I know that the faculty have too. We're all suffering. So let's try not to, you know, to point to the other areas, other departments, and kind of focus on where we are. How can we be the best that we can be? How can we save money? Come up with ideas that help me, rather than just saying, let's just fire that department. And I admire the people who stood up for facilities. I really do. I mean, it'd be easy to say, you know, who really needs, you know, don't let the grass grow, you know, we don't need to cut it every week. So I really appreciate when people come to the defense of some of these others. So I've just asked that we think about the community as a whole and think about the institution as a whole. And let's resist the politics of jealousy and you know, trying to just save ourselves and think about the institution. That's what I'm trying to do. I know most of you are as well. And I don't mean this as a criticism, but I'm just saying it's easy to point, you know, away from your own areas. So let's focus on our areas.
I want to just clarify.
Okay.
I wasn't meaning to say, pointing the finger at a certain person. I wanted to say that we're willing to take on some of that extra job if we need to do it. That's meant to be a positive.
Yeah,
in that
thank
sense.
you.
Because something's got to go. And if it's people losing their jobs and it has to happen somewhere, if other folks need to take up the slack to make that happen, I wanted to say that's.
I apologize. I did not really understand the intent of your question, so I apologize. Thank you. That's actually very altruistic, and I appreciate you're willing to step up. Thank you. Yes, hi.
Deb Thorne from the Department of Sociology. I want to share an observation about our institution and our community. U of I isn't a standalone institution. We are built on our community. And the community of Moscow, many members from the community of Moscow work as support folks, whether it is facilities, whether it's administrative assistants. Those people are the most vulnerable economically, most vulnerable with low status, and probably least likely to speak out. And our institution is less than if we don't keep them in the forefront of our decisions. They are the least entitled and the least privileged people with the most to lose. If they lose that paycheck to paycheck job, they'll be in bankruptcy. And we have a responsibility to do better. Those of us sitting here who are faculty and administrators are fairly entitled folks with really pretty decent salaries for Idaho. Pretty decent salaries. And I think we have a responsibility to have the backs of the folks who bust their butts to keep this institution going. They are our community. So when I initially heard about this possibility of outsourcing, privatizing, whatever you want to call it, facilities folks, I met with Brian. And I asked to be included in that process. That wasn't received well, for whatever reason, because I think someone needs to speak for them. And I'm hoping that you and the folks who are making these decisions don't take the costs out of their hides. There are other people who make a lot more money who can take partial cuts than the working people at this institution. And it bothers me that that was the go-to decision, or that was a go-to idea, was to privatize the most vulnerable people here. And I think there's a better way to do it. And I expect that this administration will reconsider that, because those people are our university. They are our friends and neighbors, and they deserve to be included and respected, and not the first ones to get taken advantage of or to be let go. So that's what I had to say about it, and I plead with you, do not do it on the backs of the people who are the most vulnerable.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Thank you for that comment. You know, again, this is going to be painful for all of us, and we need to make the best decision for the community. We're not trying to do it on the backs of those who are the most vulnerable. In fact, in my view, we should probably protect those who are most vulnerable. But at the end of the day, you know, there are folks that, you know, we can't do this without some pain. So it's just a matter of where, you know, it's just a reality. So it's a matter of where we take it. I'll try to make the best decisions we can to have the least amount of impact with the most empathy. And that's probably the best I can say. We'll do our best. Please.
Hello, President Green. My name is Patrick Hrdlichka. I'm a professor in chemistry, and perhaps more relevant for my comment, I was a co-chair of the Faculty Compensation Task Force, and in that context also worked with the Staff Compensation Task Force. The previous comment might have given me the best or the worst segue. I don't mean to sound tone deaf here in what I'm about to say, but we have huge financial challenges. We very likely have too large total salary expenses. You mentioned that part of the reason that we are where we are today is due to the CEC. You also happened to mention that in the ARC interview that I read today. I want us, however, to be aware of the fact that we, the employees of the University of Idaho, are not overpaid. Okay.
No, I would agree with that. Yeah.
We are demonstrably not overpaid. We have developed financial models, both for faculty as well as for staff, and all the data suggest that we are collectively, on average, at 90% of market salary, so 10% below our peer group. We are not overpaid. And that, so when I hear salary reductions or furloughs being part of the mix, I get concerned, because I believe this institution did something very good for its employees over the last couple of years, namely acknowledging that this is an issue. And my plea to you would be to continue to not to undo the good that we worked hard to get to to bring into life the mechanisms that we worked hard on to bring into life over the last couple of years. So it's only a comment.
No, thank you. You know, I understand it. Brian, does that sound right? I was trying to say I thought we were actually at market. I've had a lot of people know we're still short. We're still short.
Yeah, we still have progress. And is Wes in the room by chance? Wes, can you give me the quick statistic for staff salaries as a percentage of the total market? Okay. Okay. All right. So we got a little ways to go, Scott.
Okay.
Sorry.
Let me repeat it. He said that 10% number was actually very close to where we were, 90% of market. So thank you.
Another question
Go
from
ahead.
online.
Go ahead.
She says, what are the characteristics of the programs, services, et cetera, that will be eliminated? And what are the characteristics of those that will be retained? And added a comment that she appreciates the president's efforts to balance the checkbook like we all must do in our own households.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for recognizing that. And we have to. If we're going to have a strong institution and survive, we need to balance our checkbook. We just have to do that. I'm not really requiring any types of characteristics, from our deans or our faculty about what comes or goes. I've asked them quite simply to identify those areas that would have the least amount of impact on our ability to continue our mission, and to come up with recommendations to move forward in that manner. We do have some low enrollment programs that I'm sure that they're going to look at. I can't promise that there won't be any programs cut. I don't expect widespread programs cut. I just don't expect that. But again, I'm leaving it up to the deans and the faculty to figure out what is the best approach for us. I'm not going to do that for them. So I'm not giving them that kind of direction. Same with our VPs, which is why we've looked at everything, much to the chagrin of some folks here. But, we are going to look at everything, and we're going to balance those things against, against each other and say, okay, what things can we do that have the least impact on the institution and still help us meet our goals? I mean, I think I read somewhere someone thought $2 million that we could save in outsourcing, was a penance, but $2 million is a lot of money. It's a lot of jobs. So we need to think about which one have the least impact, on our institution. So again, I'll leave it to them. They'll bring their recommendations and we'll move forward. We have asked faculty to bend some of these things to help us prioritize, what they think is important, and we'll do the same with the staff council. And it may be that outsourcing is the lowest priority. There's something that they'd want to do last. But we are asking the community. And again, we will make decisions based on what we think is the least impactful and still help us do our mission with the highest quality that we possibly can. Again, just trying to do the right thing. Yes.
I am Ed Lewis from the Department of Entomology, Plant Pathology, and Nematology in CALS. And as faculty, we hear almost on a daily basis how important it is to increase our enrollment. So with that in mind, I have a two-part question. So the first part is whether or not you have set targets for improvement for the strategic enrollment management group. And the second part is if and when those improvements are not met, what plans do you have for changing the strategy of that group?
Yeah. So I would like them to stay on the path they're on. I mean, we had a pretty good year. Freshmen up around 2%, graduate students up. Where we really kind of fell down this last year was continuing students, and that really falls on us to try to keep those folks who are already on campus here. So, if we continue the trajectory that SEM has us on and our enrollments continue to increase, hopefully something better than 2% next year for freshmen and graduate students, that will be great for us, right? And so again, and part of that is also just being able to invest in that area. And again, we've been underinvested for an awfully long time. Our competitors have invested a hell of a lot more than we have. So we're giving folks the resources they need now, and the proof will be in the pudding next year. I believe that our enrollment will be up next year. I just believe that. It's not going to be easy because demographics are working against all universities. Both Montana schools were flat this year. University of Montana's had a 40% reduction, and they were flat this year, and they down a little bit. We were up 2% in our freshman enrollment. Not a bad comparison. So I like where they're headed. I think they have a good strategy. We have a lot of work to do. It's not a panacea. I don't think that I think that we've got a lot of hard work, but again, I think we're headed the right direction. We'll know this time next year if we're right or wrong on that we're going to continue to invest. Yeah.
President Green, a question from Zoom. Savings now will be reaching into the personnel pool. Will university leadership be offering retirement incentives to aid in employee reduction? or will this layoffs or individual staff reductions?
So we are also, like I said, nothing is off the table. We're looking at that as we speak. I think we still have some decisions to make. We're probably a couple of weeks away from making those decisions, but we're looking very hard at a voluntary separation plan as well as voluntary retirement and what that might look like. So there's more to come on that. I wish I had more, but again, we're in early days here. We came to you as early as we knew we had, what the numbers were so we could have a conversation. I wish I could tell you exactly what those were today because it would make my job easier, but we're going to get those to you very quickly. Please.
I'm Michael Plackey. I'm a 2008 alumnus and a 15-year employee of Auxiliaries, Financial Aid, Student Accounts, and Bioinformatics and Computational Biology. I agree with your assertion that our only options are to increase revenue or reduce expenses. But I disagree that there's no ways available to increase revenue using the resources already available on campus. It sounds like you've said in your reaction to the revenue question before that all you're doing is marketing. But why are you not doing anything to look at additional sources of income on campus, and what money are you leaving on the table?
Yes, such as?
Let's see. Vandal card no longer has money on the Vandal card, so students can't use financial aid on campus at the bookstore. There's Vandal card at the vending machine. You could do things like, whenever I go to Rite Aid, they ask me if I want to take $1 and make a donation. Why don't you do that at student accounts? I've got several other ideas if you need them, but there's no.
We're going to give you our website, so send me those ideas. No, like as I said earlier, no idea is too small. We'll take that. Because once you have a few ideas like that, they end up adding up to real money, right?
Well,
so we'll
I
do
think
that.
Vandal card use at the bookstore was over $500,000 a semester at one point.
Yeah, so we've got several, tens of millions, right? So that 500,000 is a good start. I'd take that in a
That's a couple of
heartbeat.
jobs.
Yeah. Thank you. I'll also say we got, and I'll just use this as an example, we had an idea from one of our faculty members who had studied the way that we actually refill our big water tanks up on the hill. And we're currently testing that theory because that might save us some money as well. So we're taking your ideas very seriously. That's why we got the website we're going to give you in a little bit. If you have ideas like that, let us know because we definitely want to do as much as we possibly can to lessen the impact and lower the amount of impact to the overall institution. I'm sorry, how are you?
Fine. I'm Jennifer Johnson-Long. I'm also in the math department. So for one, I think you talked about reaching out to alumni and trying to get donations, do some development for marketing, which I think is important. We also have to remember that the whole higher ed sector is expected to shrink in the coming decades, right? We are going to have to not expect to grow our enrollments to solve our problems. We need to do what we do better, and we need to do a better job of educating the students in Idaho as a whole. Our students are coming to us more and more underprepared. And anything that we do, any changes that we make needs to stay central to our mission. So any cuts not only need to see what they preserve, you need to not only look to not cut something that is important to the education of students, but the things that remain need to double down on their importance to the education of students. We need to have students integrated into IT, not just at the help desk. We need to have internships within our internal departments. We need to ask, just as Rob was saying, the faculty can do more. I mean, our departmental staff, I know in our department, at least in the departmental staff I've worked with at the colleges, are extremely efficient. They wear many, many hats.
Thank you.
So
that's what I'm finding as well.
When you talk about centralizing services, what I see is that you're going to hire someone to do a job that someone else was doing already in their extra time. And it concerns me that it's not going to save money. So all I'm saying is whatever you're going to do, you need to make sure that you use the expertise of the people in the room, like my colleague who was rejected when she offered her help, and make sure that you're making decisions that are actually going to make us stronger and make us better. If we can use the resources of, say, MC to see what the impact on our local community is, we might be able to take that to our governor or to our state legislature and say, can we get a one-time amount of money so that we don't have to fire the people whose jobs we can terminate easily in 2 weeks and can slowly unwind some of these people who have a year to find another job when they're laid off, right? I mean, there's ways to say, hey, can you just give us a little bit so that the plane can land instead of crash?
Yeah, so thank you. So two comments. One, we're not going to gain money from the state. We're just not. The governor's actually asked us to be prepared for holdbacks because the revenues in the state right now are below what they expect them to be. Okay, so I just to put that out there. Secondly, when we talk about centralization, let me share a little bit about my concept of what centralization is to put your mind at rest. We already have, let's say, IT people embedded, and I'll just use this as an example, embedded in each of the colleges. We already have development people embedded in those colleges. We have marketing people embedded in those colleges. Right now, they all work independently. What I'm saying is when we talk about centralization, we're talking about distributed centralization. And what that means is that if somebody were, let's say the College of Education lost their IT person, we would be able to partially use an IT person from, let's say, the College of Ag to help backfill that and provide that support. So that's what I mean when we're talking about centralization. It's more about shared reporting lines rather than just a single reporting line into the college. That's kind of my view of what centralization is. So I'm not looking to fire somebody in the college and hire them up on the hill. That's not what we're talking about. So hopefully that's reassuring. Thank you. Jody. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's
Hi
go this
there.
way.
I'm Kathleen Colley from Athletics, and I was just wondering if you could just give a brief thought on, with your new committees, the future of WUI?
Yeah, so WUI is an investment. You know, we were given a choice. For a while, we didn't fully participate in WUI. We just did it for certain, and correct me if I'm wrong, John, but I think for certain programs and in certain states. And they came back to us and said, sorry, you just can't do that. You either are in or out. So we're in. And really what that means is that, you know, we are bringing in many more students, but at a lower margin. So instead of paying full out of state, they're paying 150% of in-state. And that has the effect of lowering our margin. We think that that's a better position than just exiting WUI altogether, but it's going to take us a couple of years to break even on that. So we had a 40% increase in those students last year. I think that's right. Does that sound right? Yeah, 40% increase in those students last year. You know, if that continues, eventually we will close that gap. But it has cost us margin, and it was part of our revenue problem that you saw there. Jody.
All right, our online friends are engaged.
Good.
Partial question, partial comment, I believe. As the flagship institution of Idaho, what's the state's obligation to fund education? Funding commitment from the legislature has fallen every year, now about only 43% from the state, adding a bigger burden onto our students who can't take any heavier tuition loads. State funding is required. Cuts won't fix this issue.
Yeah, no, I agree. Using slightly different numbers, but you know, getting to the same point, I had lunch with some of our legislators, local legislators, yesterday. So yesterday or the day before, I lose track. This week has been crazy. I shared with them data that shows that since 1989, our share of the general education budget, or general state budget, has declined from 15% down to 7.5%. And where has that money gone? It's gone into health and welfare and into corrections. So we've been subsidizing that over time. And when you look at tuition increases, and they always ask why, you know, we're giving you more money, which we can talk about in a minute, you know, so why are you raising tuition? Well, if you look at our tuition increases, and include those as part of the state budget, we've seen tuition increase at almost the same rate as the state has been declining their expenditures. So much so, I think there's only a 2% difference, and it's 2% less than it was in 1989 or whenever that data was beginning than it is now. So we've effectively been more efficient, and we've effectively taken the lack of state funds and we've put it on the backs of our students. And to me, that's dangerous long term. We know where we're at now. We've got a lot of students who can't even afford the University of Idaho, which is one of the best values around. So we have to find better ways. So that was my message to the legislature. Don't know if that'll get much traction, particularly this year if their revenues are going to be down. But couldn't agree more. We are not in a great position. When the legislature is providing $95 million to the University of Idaho and we have a $400 million budget. It just you kind of wonder, okay, where do we go from here? Are we going to keep being able to raise tuition so our students can't afford it? Do we have to find other sources? It's a model right now that hasn't worked very well. And Idaho's not the only one in this condition. We know that this has been happening across the country. But I think we can do what we can do and what we can control. And for me, making the university affordable will help bring students here. It'll help actually drive revenues if we can keep our tuition lower. And I think it's a better answer than trying to put all of our increased costs on the backs of our students. So that's what I'm trying to avoid doing. Yes.
Hello, Scott. My name is Jordan Hardy. I'm a grad student in the math department, and I'm also the vice president of the Graduate and Professional Student Association. So my question is, how much of the brunt of this can the grad student community expect to take? So in the past few years, there have been many advancements in how well we support our graduate students in terms of TAs and RAs being fully funded. Is that going to be maintained?
I don't know. Again, I push these decisions down to our dean, so I look to our dean of our graduate student, graduate programs, dean of our College of Graduate Studies, to help me figure out how we can do that with the least impact. And that's really all I have at the moment. We'll have more information as these plans actually come together.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Thank you for your question. Appreciate it. Over here.
Hi, so my name is Sam Myers. I'm a senior undergraduate here, and we've talked a bit about enrollment and specifically enrollment within the WUI program. And so I just have a comment on that. So I'm from the Seattle area, and when I was applying for schools, I had no idea that the University of Idaho even existed. And neither did anyone I went to high school with, or even any of our counselors in my high school. And I think that's a real shame because obviously we have the enrollment issues, but also this university offers a lot to high school students that a lot of universities all across the nation can't. We have excellent research, good class sizes, excellent faculty, an excellent honors program, a safe community, et cetera, et cetera. And so if we're looking at marketing solutions to try and increase enrollment and offset that budget gap, it seems to me that specifically targeting enrollment outside of the state should be a huge factor in that, because like you mentioned, those people are paying higher tuition even within the WUI program. And it's a essentially untapped market for this university. There's no enrollment outside or marketing enrollment outside of the state.
Yeah, thank you. So, much of our marketing expenditure is actually targeted at the Spokane Valley, but you're right, it goes beyond that. And we've got a recruiter in Portland. We've got an open position where I think we're close to filling. I don't know, is Dean here? No, I think yeah, right. That's right, he's overseas. We've got a position we're close to filling in Seattle. We've got 2 recruiters down in California. So, we are making a push on that. Having said that, our primary mission as a land grant is for our students, in state too, and to increase the go-on rate here. And we do a very good job of that. 70% of our student body are in-state kids. It's well over 70% actually. So we don't want to forget, while we do push for out-of-state, and Montana State and Boise State have both done a great job of that, and we can learn from that and we can take advantage of that. We still can't take our eye off of our in-state students. I mean, we owe it to those kids too to continue to get them to this university, because we are the best university in the state. So, yes.
Great. Hi, President Green. Tim Bartholomew. I'm a 4th-year professor in geological sciences. Thanks for getting us off on the right foot here. I really appreciate what you and your team are doing I also wanted to note that when you're sort of expenses versus revenue, that it looks like that our revenues have actually been increasing over the last 5 or 6 years. And I think that's really pretty phenomenal. And I think what I'm still not quite clear on is in the red line of that red and green plot of how the expenses have grown so quickly over the last 6 years. And I guess I'm not quite clear yet as to how, is there an option to kind of rewind, 3 or 4 years ago, to when we had lower expenses, and what are the major changes that have changed, that have occurred in the operation of the University of Idaho that have led to all of a sudden we're spending $20 million more than we were bringing in.
Well, it's a good question. And again, I'd probably turn this over to Brian, but again, a lot of it has to do, we just talked about our faculty not being, and staff for that matter, not being overpaid. But a lot of it has come from compensation. A lot of it's come from healthcare. Brian, any other big buckets I'm not talking about?
I'll only just mention one other one, Scott. If you look at the graph of employee FTE, the simple reality is it's up and student FTE is down. And there are two drivers to salary expense: your individual salaries and the number of people we pay. So that's the other major function reflected in the graph. And then John just tapped me on the shoulder and reminded me that we have significant capital outlay expenditures every year. So this is building projects, infrastructure improvements, those kinds of things that we have to deal with on an annual basis. We have literally hundreds of millions of dollars worth of deferred maintenance, and we don't have the luxury of simply sitting on buildings that are literally falling down around us. So we do incur significant expenses every year in that category too. Thanks, Scott.
Has that really increased markedly over the last 2 years, though?
We have had a couple of major projects over the last 2 years in particular, major land acquisitions, about $10 million worth of land acquisitions connected to a cafe project, Sandpoint Organic Agriculture Center, and a couple others. So that's the main difference over the last couple of years.
Okay, well, I'd point out cafe was primarily private giving, though. So, but to the point, there are other things that are included in that. So, thank you.
President Green, I know we only have a couple more minutes left, so we have 1 or 2 questions left. So,
excellent. First, I think we should note there are a lot of great ideas being presented online. We'll gather those up, so thank you to everybody who's presenting those. A question: as the memo stated, furlough is an option on the table. Is there any discussion of a furlough occurring over the coming winter break while the university is already closed to the public?
Again, I'm waiting for folks to come up to, provide ideas to me, but I think that's one we should probably talk about. I think it's not a bad idea, and it's one we'll add to the mix. Sorry, go to this side, and then we'll come over here. Go ahead.
Hi, thanks. Liz Castle, I'm also in geological sciences. 2 quick questions on the healthcare, which I love, which is a great program right now. But do we expect any major changes for sort of employee benefits on that front? I know we saw a little bit of increase in healthcare costs this year. Do we expect it to continue to increase? Do we plan any big changes on the plans? And then my other question on the healthcare was with the retirees, is this retirees who are not able to go on Medicare? Is there a reason why we're not taking advantage of that program?
It's a good question. Both those are good questions. One thing I will say is I just expect that healthcare costs will continue to grow. I mean, the trajectory just keeps getting steeper, right? And it's not just us, it's across the country. So I do expect we're all going to be paying more, the university and our people. On retiree benefits, you raise a good point, because we do, I'd say we have 4 tiers, and Brian, correct me if I'm wrong in any of this. For 3 of those tiers, one of those tiers is pretty much fixed, and for 3 of those tiers, those costs continue also to increase for us. But the Medicare supplemental plans are actually a better deal for folks in those other 3 tiers, and but it seems like we're not getting the word out on that because we have a lot of people still taking advantage of the university program. So, one of the things we're looking at, and we haven't made any decisions yet, and I will first communicate to the retirees and the faculty senate and the faculty staff before we formalize anything. But we are looking at, okay, could we communicate better over a period of time to get folks to move off of that our plan and onto the supplemental welfare plan, which quite not welfare, but Medicare, which frankly is a better plan. So you raise a good point. And so we're focused on that. And when we're ready, we'll go to them and talk to them about it and figure out the best way to work through that. Good question. Yes.
Hi, my name is Nate Spain. I'm a plumber at Facilities. A quick comment on the marketing. I have two daughters that graduated from Moscow High. One's enrolled here.
That's awesome. Thank you for sending her here.
Yeah. She comes here because I did it. She comes here not because she got any marketing.
Right.
More marketing from Boise State and from University of Montana. Anyway, we have a school a mile away that we should market to. Anyway, so with regards to facilities management potentially being privatized, I'm wondering how much the university knows that we do at facilities management or at facilities that's not part of maintenance and upkeep. We do in my shop, we do a large portion of our work is extra projects over and above, remodels, in-house work that we're doing, that we're converting spaces. Instead of subcontracting it out, we have this group of skilled tradesmen there at facilities that do the work. And we bill at rates that were billable in 1991. We bill a journeyman plumber out at $45 an hour. That's what the university pays to have us show up and do our trade. I'm curious if the university knows that we bring in XYZ Facilities Management Global to do our facilities management, that how much of that work that those guys do, if we choose to stay around and work for XYZ Facilities Management Global, is going to be a change order. I can envision that now we have a company here that's not here to save the day. We have a company that's here to make a profit. So my job right now, my interests are aligned with U of I in keeping our facilities open. If I work for XYZ Facilities Management Global, my alignment will be towards turning in as many change orders as I can for that company that can be billed out at $120 an hour for the same smiley face that you guys get for $45 an hour right now. And we have a ways. We have a ways to go before we get to 90%. Percy makes it somewhat tolerable.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for your comment.
President Green, I think we have time for one more question. I mean, it's your call.
Yeah, we got time. I prefer to answer as many as we can. Thank you. Go ahead.
I'm very short. Hi, Katie Blevins, Journalism and Mass Media. There we go. So I know we don't have a lot of concretes right now, which is fine. Like we're brainstorming, we're trying to talk as a community. And I just kind of wondered what the timeline or expected timeline is, particularly if we're talking about the potential of like a winter furlough, like that's in several weeks. And so some people, particularly in our staff, living paycheck to paycheck. And so I just kind of wondered what an expected timeline is so that people can make decisions about their lives and how they're going to be living day to day.
Yeah, so we thank you. We've asked that the deans and the vice presidents have our plans to us no later than January so that we are able to actually, start to put those into our budget and plan for those. There will be things that will be communicated before that, just because we want to get as much information out as quickly as possible. For instance, the VERP and voluntary retirement, we'll probably talk about that. We may talk about furloughs, coming up too. People able to take some time, for non-pay if they want to do that. And for some, we may decide to do that. And if we do that, we'll talk about that soon. So there are things that you'll see coming out, I think, in chunks, as it were. But probably the big bang will be in January when we require all these plans to be fully vetted and, okay, this is what we're going to go do. And, we'll be communicating to folks when those plans come out. Does that make sense? Great, thank you. Yes.
President Green, thank you so much for allowing us to hurl questions at you. I'm going to hurl a question at you that I've hurled at you before, but in a much smaller context.
Okay.
And I think your answer to me might benefit everyone in the room. I'm Robert Casely, by the way, from the Department of Theater. My question is about I'm sorry to ask this, but it's about the basketball arena. Thank you. And the way I understand it, that it's being funded through student fees. Obviously, we got a very large and generous gift from the credit union itself and from a fundraising campaign to receive gifts to fund that. If, as everyone has suggested, student enrollment is likely to go down, therefore student fees will be reduced, is it reasonable to assume that facility could become a millstone around the neck of this institution for generations to come? And in hindsight, when we decided to break ground, when we thought this was a $1 to $5 million mistake, is it a bad idea?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. Yeah. So we believe that student revenues are going to go down, not necessarily enrollment. So when we talked about this, we talked about WUI, right? So if you have more students on campus, they're still going to pay student fees. They're still going to pay housing. There's a lot of other good revenues that come along with that. So, I don't think there's going to be a shortfall in student fees. I think the students will make good on that. It's a 30-year commitment, right? So I think they'll make good on that over time. This is going to be a great facility. It is being financed not on the backs of our operations, but it's being financed, through private giving, through gifts, as you pointed out, and through student fees. And I'm even looking to go back and seeing if we can get some state money on that, because there's some life and safety systems in there that, in theory, should qualify, right? So I'm gonna, I still got a $7 million bogey, and I'm working to close that as quickly as I can through fundraising and, like I said, maybe going to the state and seeing if we can get some from there. So I think it's going to be a great facility for the community. I know it's hard to talk about in times like this because people just assume that that facility may be adding on to some of the problems we've got. But if that facility wasn't conceived, if it wasn't being built as we speak, and this is why I think I told you last time, we'd still have this deficit. We'd still have to work through it. So I just, we made that decision, and I'm going to work very hard to make sure that we raise that money and we get this thing built, and it's going to be great for our community. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Let's go over here. I'm not sure who was first. Was he first? Okay, go ahead.
Noah Jensen. I'm a master's student.
Hey, Noah,
I really
good to
want
see
to know
you
what
again.
I, as a student, or we as a Vandal community, can actually do to help.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, do I have this thing? Do we have the website actually up here? Let's see what I got. No, we got nothing. Well, there it is. Did I?
Yeah. Go back one. There you go.
Ah, there we are. Noah and all like-minded people, please send, and we heard a few, send your ideas here, and we will evaluate them. We really appreciate them, and we've already received some great ideas. So, and we will try to do everything we possibly can to minimize the impact again by taking these on. So, okay, now.
Thank you, President Green. My name's Elena Perry. I do work in facilities also. I am the building trades project manager, so I couldn't leave Nate hanging.
Yeah.
That's one of my guys. Many of you in here have had us come and do work for your facilities. You know what we do. I'm not here to vie for me or or our jobs, all of us are worried. I know everybody in facilities, admin, ops, auxiliary services, and SRC got the letter saying we were potentially going to be outsourced or laid off or whatever. So we're all sleeping a little rough at night, and I just want you to know that we're in it together. The other thing I have a direct question regarding is the idea that we're still hiring employees while we're considering laying off or reducing salaries or furloughing others. I don't see how that matrix really works, and I wanted to know if you could tell us why it's happening.
Sure. Thank you. Good question. There are certain positions that just we need to continue to do our mission. And again, I've left it to the deans and the faculty to identify which ones those are. And I've made it very clear that the last thing we want to do is hire somebody that we have to let go, because usually the last ones in are the first to go, right? So, we've had those tough conversations, because I agree with you. The optics aren't great, and I said, okay, this needs to be a position that, is critical to us going forward, because you got to remember, if you bring them in, they're adding to your costs, and that means somewhere else you're going to have to cut, right? So we are doing. I haven't seen too many positions that have been coming to my desk for approval, but there have been a few, and so those are the ones you're seeing, I'm sure. And just know that we're vetting those very carefully. And I've been very clear that, we need to be very careful about anyone we're hiring at this point. Thank you for that. Wow. Did we finish? Well, anyone in any of the centers? Yeah.
All right. Let me back up. Perhaps some comments. When deciding to raise tuition, it seems that the income of Idaho families is ignored. The median income in many counties for a family is between $30,000 and $45,000. How can they possibly afford $8,000 per year for tuition alone? It may be counterintuitive, but I bet if we lowered tuition, we'd increase revenue by attracting more students.
Yeah, so I'm not sure I can afford to lower tuition at the moment, but I actually agree. And I'd like to hold the line on tuition. I think that we are still competitive with pretty much everyone around us. Utah State makes a good argument they're cheaper. We don't buy it, and we plan to respond to that, but there are certain circumstances where they may be. Just know that, I really want to hold the line on tuition. I think it's the right thing for all of us longer term. We'll get more students in the door, and we'll be better off. We'll probably generate more revenue over time. It's a good question. Oh, sorry. I see you over there. Hi.
Hi, I'm Sashi White. Nice to meet you. So when we talk about better budgeting, we could talk about cutting the non-academic administration positions, which have doubled in the last 25 years. But instead of going, on a witch hunt for the least valuable people, which is completely nonsensical, why aren't we talking about the discrepancy between the highest paid people and the lowest paid people? For example, the provost salary is over $400,000. A single person, a single person, this single salary could pay for 6 professors, 6 administrative, assistant professors. Why are we making people expendable while protecting the salaries of those at the top?
Thank you for the question. Frankly, I don't know what I would do without a provost. I don't think you want me doing that job, to be honest. We could start cutting VPs, and then I think that you'd probably see, how things would get managed. Someone raised this in faculty the other day. I said, which VP do you want me to get rid of? Because at the end of the day, if we get rid of a provost, and you got me making decisions on academic affairs, faculty, really, right? So, we all have a role here, and there's a market for us. And trust me, everybody who's here, could be somewhere else, and we want to be here because we could make more money somewhere else, right? We all want to be here. So I guess I get back to it, rather than pointing at a provost or a vice president or a faculty member or a distinguished faculty member, I would say let's focus on our community and try to come up with the right solution for us. And rather than attacking a position, I just don't think that that's the right way to go.
You answered a question I wasn't asking. The question I was asking wasn't about cutting positions. It was about changing the wages that those positions are paid. All these positions are valuable. We should not make these people expendable, but change the salaries of the people at the very top, the fat that can be cut.
Yeah, well, the people at the top, that's a market, right? So if we cut the salaries of the people at the top, they're going to go somewhere else. They can. So I just don't think that's a realistic solution. I'm sorry, I just don't. Thank you. Thank you.
President Green, I hate to be a downer, but we have to turn this room around for an event tonight at 5 o'clock. And so can you maybe talk about an opportunity in the future to come back and have another campus conversation? Given the ISUB closure, we have an incredibly tight space crunch that we are trying to manage.
I just want, how many more do you have, Jody? I'd like to finish.
We have others, but I think we can follow up with them.
Okay.
There's a number of them online, but I have a really great comment. Taylor Rainey, I think you hit the spot on. We can all do our part by paying close attention to our students and delivering high quality instruction. Happy students go home to younger friends and family and tell them about their experience.
Thank you. All right, so I'm getting the hook, but let me just say thank you all for coming out here. I deeply appreciate it. I'm sorry we're all in this position. We're in it together, though. We're going to come through this together. You'll see. I'm confident next year we're going to be looking back on this and saying, boy, that was painful, but we came through it together and we came through it as a community. So we'll take all your feedback. Thank you. We have heard you, and wait for more communication. There's going to be a lot more to come. We're a great university. We're a crown jewel for this state. Nobody does it better than we do. Go Vandals. Thank you.